They said she wasn't worth the price of a train ticket. By sunrise, a whole town would realize they were the ones who couldn't afford her. The wind moved through the station like it had a purpose, slipping under coats, through cracks in old wood, carrying the kind of cold that didn't just bite skin but settled into bone and stayed there. Ethan Cole stepped down from the last car, boots hitting the platform with a dull, certain weight, the kind a man carried when he owned more land than he could ride across in a day. His coat caught the lantern light, dark wool, clean lines, untouched by dust, untouched by need. Men like him didn't linger in places like this. They passed through. They didn't stop for anything that didn't serve a purpose. But then he saw her. She wasn't begging. That was the first thing that didn't fit. Curled near a support beam, shoulders drawn tight against the cold, her dress thin, worn, but her hands were wrapped around something small at her chest like it mattered more than warmth. People walked past her. Not fast, not slow, just around, like she was already gone. Ethan watched longer than he should have. "You'll freeze out here," he said, voice low, not unkind, not soft either. She didn't look at him right away. When she did, her eyes were clear. Too clear for someone at the edge of collapse. "Then I'll freeze," she answered, like it was already decided. No fear, no plea, just a line drawn somewhere inside her that the cold hadn't crossed. That should have been the end of it. A man like Ethan knew when to walk away. Knew better than to get tangled in something that didn't belong to him. But something in the way her fingers tightened around that small object, not desperate, not frantic, deliberate, held him there 1 second longer than reason allowed. He stepped toward the ticket window, pulled a folded bill from his coat, and slid it across without looking back. "Next train out," he said. The clerk blinked at the amount. For her, Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The paper ticket slid across the counter with a quiet scratch. Behind him, a few heads turned. Whispered. Not loud enough to challenge. Just enough to shape a story. A rich cowboy. A freezing woman. A price paid too easily. By the time Ethan turned back, she was trying to stand. Pride moves strange when the body is failing. She made it halfway up before her knees gave out beneath her. He caught her before she hit the wood. Light. Too light. Like whatever strength she had left wasn't meant for herself. Inside the station room, the heat was weak but real. Enough to bring color back slowly. Enough to make the difference between a choice and an ending. She woke with tension first, not relief. Her eyes moved, measured the distance, the door him. "Why?" she asked, voice rough but steady. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms loose, not closing the space between them. "Didn't figure you'd ask," he said. She shifted slightly, and that's when he saw it clearly. The silver medallion in her hand. Worn. Edges smoothed by time, not carelessness. She wasn't holding it for comfort. She was holding it like proof. And something about that told him this wasn't a woman waiting to be saved. This was a woman carrying something that hadn't finished its work yet. Outside, the wind picked up again. And somewhere in the distance, hooves struck frozen ground, steady, deliberate, getting closer. The sound of hooves did not rush, did not scatter. It came steady, measured, like men who already believed they were right before they even arrived. Ethan heard it before anyone else in the room reacted, his head tilting slightly, eyes shifting toward the frost-layered window without turning his body. Clara heard it too, not with surprise, with recognition. Her fingers tightened around the silver medallion, not out of fear, but as if confirming something she had already accepted long before this moment. "They found me faster than I thought," she said quietly, her voice low enough that it did not travel beyond him. Ethan did not ask who they were. Men like him learned early that the question was rarely useful. The answer was always the same. Trouble that did not belong to him. And yet, he stayed where he was. Outside, the horses came to a stop, leather creaking, boots touching frozen ground one after another. No shouting, no chaos, just presence. The kind that made people step back without being told. Inside the station, the clerk suddenly found something important to arrange behind the counter. A man near the stove shifted his chair farther away. No one wanted to be part of what was about to unfold. Clara moved to stand, slower this time, forcing her body to cooperate. She swayed once, then steadied herself against the edge of the wooden bench. Ethan watched her balance, not stepping forward, not offering a hand. Not because he did not see the struggle, but because he understood something else. She would refuse it. The door opened with a sharp push, cold air sweeping in ahead of three men dressed in long coats, dusted with travel. Their eyes scanned once, quick, efficient, landing on Clara as if she had been the only thing in the room all along. Clara Vance, the one in front said, voice even, controlled, like he had said the name many times before. No anger. No rush. Just certainty. Clara did not answer. She did not step back either. She simply stood there, shoulders squared, the medallion still resting in her palm. Ethan noticed that. Not the men. Not the coats. Not even the way the room seemed to shrink around them. That small piece of silver. And the way she held it like it mattered more than what came next. You are coming with us. The man continued, taking one step forward, not reaching, not forcing. The kind of approach that assumed compliance before it was given. Clara let out a slow breath. I cannot, she said. Not defiant. Not pleading. Just final. The men exchanged a glance. Not surprised. Just adjusting. Ethan finally shifted his weight, pushing himself off the wall, his boots making a quiet sound against the wood that somehow carried farther than it should have. The lead man's eyes flicked to him for the first time, measuring, calculating, placing him in the equation. This does not concern you, the man said. Ethan looked at him, calm, unhurried, the kind of stillness that did not come from comfort, but from decision. Everything that happens in a room I am standing in concerns me, he replied. Not loud, not aggressive, just stated like fact. Clara's gaze moved toward him then, something new. Flickering there. Not trust. Not yet. But something close enough to notice. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls again, and somewhere down the tracks, a train whistle echoed faint and distant, as if time itself was giving them one last chance to choose a direction. The man in front adjusted his stance slightly. She is responsible for what happened in Red Hollow, he said. The name hung in the air. Ethan did not react immediately, but something in the way Clara's hand tightened around that medallion told him the story was not as simple as the word sounded. The name Red Hollow did not echo in the room the way the man expected it to. It did not spark outrage or recognition. It settled low, like dust, unnoticed by most, but not by the one person who mattered. Ethan watched Clara, not the men, not the door, not the shifting bodies trying to make themselves smaller. Her reaction was quiet. Too quiet. Her shoulders did not tense. Her breath did not quicken. Only her fingers moved, pressing the edge of the silver medallion into her palm like she needed to feel something solid in a world that had already turned uncertain. Responsible, Ethan repeated slowly, tasting the word like it needed proving before it could be believed. The man in front nodded once. 12 people, he said. Gone because of her decisions. Still no anger in his voice. Just a statement shaped to sound like truth. Clara closed her eyes for a brief moment, not in surrender, not in regret, but in something closer to exhaustion. When she opened them again, she did not look at the men. She looked at Ethan. That is what they say, she said. Her voice did not break. It did not defend. It simply existed between them, unfinished. Ethan took a slow step forward, closing just enough distance to make the moment belong to him as much as to anyone else. And what do you say? He asked. The room seemed to lean in without moving. Clara studied him, as if measuring whether the question deserved an answer. Then she lifted her hand slightly, enough for the medallion to catch the weak station light. I say they buried the truth before they buried the dead, she replied. The words did not rise. They settled. Heavy. Final. One of the men shifted, just slightly, the first crack in their steady presence. The lead man's expression did not change, but his eyes hardened a fraction. You had your chance to explain, he said. Clara's lips pressed together, not in fear, but in restraint. They had their chance to listen, she answered. Ethan's gaze moved from her to the men and back again, weighing something that had nothing to do with law and everything to do with instinct. He had heard accusations before, seen men claim certainty where there was none. What he had not seen was this. A woman accused of failure, who still carried the tools to try again. He noticed it then. The bag at her side. Worn leather. Edges cracked. Not empty. Not abandoned. Kept. Protected. Like the medallion. Like something that still had purpose left in it. What happened in Red Hollow? He asked, not looking at the men this time. Clara hesitated. Not because she did not want to answer. Because she knew the cost of saying it out loud. They were sick, she said finally. Not all at once. Not loud. It started small. A cough. A fever. Something they thought would pass. Her voice slowed, not for effect, but because the memory carried weight. I told them to isolate. To stop gathering. To change the water source. To wait. The man behind the lead one let out a quiet breath, almost a scoff, but held it back. Clara continued anyway. They did not like being told to wait. She lowered her hand, the medallion resting again against her chest. So they chose not to. Silence followed. Not empty. Not simple. The kind that forced a man to decide what he believed before anyone else spoke again. Ethan looked at the lead man. And that makes her responsible? He asked. The man's jaw tightened slightly. She left, he said. She walked away when things got worse. Clara's eyes flickered, just once. Not denial. Something deeper. No, she said quietly. I was told to leave. And this time, the room did not ignore it. The words I was told to leave did not fall apart in the air. They settled into it, quiet and heavy, like something that had been waiting to be heard in the right room, in front of the right person. Ethan did not look away from her. He did not rush to fill the silence. He had learned long ago that truth did not need help, it only needed space. The man in front shifted his stance again, just enough to show that the ground under his certainty was no longer as firm as it had been when he walked in. You expect anyone to believe that? He asked, but this time there was a strain beneath the control, something thinner, something closer to defense than authority. Clara did not answer immediately. She reached down slowly, picking up the worn leather bag at her side, her movements careful, not because she was afraid of them, but because she understood that what she held mattered more than how she was seen. She opened it just enough for Ethan to catch a glimpse. Small glass vials, wrapped cloth, clean instruments, kept in order despite everything else falling apart around her. Nothing careless, nothing abandoned. I did not leave empty-handed, she said softly. I left with what could still help them. One of the men behind the lead one looked at the bag, then quickly looked away, like seeing it made something harder to ignore. The lead man took another step forward, slower this time. You walked away when people needed you, he said. That is what matters. Clara shook her head, just once. No, she replied. What matters is that they chose comfort over caution, and when it stopped being comfortable, they needed someone to blame. Her eyes did not rise, did not challenge. They simply held steady in a way that made arguing with her feel smaller. Ethan let out a quiet breath through his nose. Not frustration, not agreement, just recognition. He had seen towns do that before. Seen men protect their pride, even when it cost them more than they could afford. And now they want her back, he said, finally turning his gaze fully to the men. Not to listen, Clara added quietly. To answer for something they refused to understand. The wind outside pressed harder against the walls, a long, low sound that filled the space between words. Somewhere in the distance, the train whistle came again, closer this time, not distant anymore, but approaching, inevitable. Time was moving whether any of them were ready or not. The lead man straightened slightly, as if reminding himself of his role. You will come with us, he said again, but the certainty was thinner now, stretched across something that was no longer as simple as it had been when he stepped through the door. Clara looked at him, then at Ethan, and for the first time, something like hesitation touched her expression. Not fear, not doubt in herself, but doubt in what would happen if she stayed where she was. Ethan saw it. That shift, that question forming before it was spoken. He pushed himself away from the wall fully this time, stepping forward until he stood between her and the men, not blocking, not challenging, just present in a way that changed the shape of the room. The train is coming, he said, his voice calm, grounded, like he was speaking about something simple, something already decided. The men glanced toward the door without meaning to. The sound was unmistakable now, steel on steel, the rhythm of something large and unstoppable drawing near. Clara's fingers brushed against the medallion again, a habit now, a quiet anchor. Ethan reached into his coat slowly, pulling out the ticket he had bought earlier, the paper still crisp despite everything that had happened since. He held it out toward her, not forcing it into her hand, just offering it in the space between them. You said you could not go with them, he said. You did not say you could not go somewhere else. The words did not push. They opened. Clara looked at the ticket, then at him, then back at the man, and in that brief, suspended moment, the choice in front of her stopped being about running or staying, and became something else entirely. something that had not been offered to her before, the chance to decide her own direction. The ticket did not move at first. It stayed between them, a thin piece of paper holding more weight than anything else in the room. Clara looked at it like it was not an escape, not a gift, but a question she had been avoiding for a long time. The train's approach grew louder, the steel rhythm rolling closer, filling the silence with something that could not be ignored. The men felt it too. Time was no longer standing still for their version of events. "If you step on that train," the lead man said, his voice tightening just enough to show the edge beneath it, "you are proving everything they believe about you." Clara's gaze shifted to him, steady, unshaken. "No," she answered quietly. "I am proving they never wanted the truth." The words did not rise, did not fight. They settled into the room like something already decided. Ethan did not look at her. He kept his hand extended, the ticket still waiting, not forcing the moment forward, not pulling it back. He had done his part. The rest was hers. The train whistle cut through the air again, louder now, closer, the sound of something arriving whether anyone was ready or not. The clerk behind the counter straightened, suddenly remembering his duties. A man by the stove stood up, brushing off his coat, eager to become part of something normal again. The world was moving. Clara took a breath, slow, controlled, and reached forward. Her fingers brushed the edge of the ticket, hesitated, then closed around it. Not quickly, not desperately, deliberately. The moment she did, something shifted. Not in the room, in the men. The lead man stepped forward, just once, instinct before thought. "You walk away now," he said, "and you do not come back." Clara met his eyes, calm in a way that did not need strength to prove itself. "I already walked away," she said. "You just decided to notice now." Ethan turned then, moving toward the door, not checking if she followed, not asking. He simply stepped into the cold again, trusting that decisions made in silence carried farther than anything spoken out loud. For a second, Clara remained where she was. Then she picked up her bag, her movements slower now, her body still catching up to the choice her mind had already made. She stepped forward, passing the men without brushing against them, without lowering her gaze. The door opened, the cold rushed in, and she stepped out onto the platform beside Ethan. The train came into view, headlights cutting through the dark, steam rising in thick clouds that curled into the night sky. It slowed as it approached. Metal grinding softly against metal, powerful but controlled. People began to gather, small movements, quiet urgency, the normal rhythm of departure returning to the space. Clara stood still for a moment, looking at the train, then at the tracks stretching beyond it, disappearing into distance. "Where does it go?" she asked, her voice softer now, not uncertain, but aware of what she was asking. Ethan glanced at the line of cars, then back at her. "Far enough," he said. "Not a destination, not a promise, just distance." Clara nodded once, as if that was enough. But then her hand moved again, not to the ticket this time, not to her bag, but to the medallion resting against her chest. She held it for a second longer than before, her thumb tracing its worn edge, and Ethan noticed something shift in her expression. Not hesitation, not fear, something else, something pulling her backward instead of forward. The train slowed further, almost at a full stop now, doors beginning to open along the line. People stepped closer. The moment had arrived. But Clara did not move. She stared at the train, then past it, as if she was seeing something that was not there in front of her, but somewhere miles away, somewhere she had left unfinished. Ethan watched her carefully, saying nothing. And then she spoke again, quieter this time. "They are still there," she said. Not to him, not to the men behind them, to herself. And that was when Ethan understood this was never about leaving. The words "they are still there" did not drift away with the steam from the train. They stayed, low and steady, like something rooted deeper than cold or fear or escape. Ethan did not answer right away. He watched the way Clara stood, not leaning forward toward the open doors, not stepping back either, caught in a place that was not hesitation but recognition. The train hissed as it came to a full stop, metal settling, doors opening with a dull clank one after another. People moved quickly now, boots on wood, voices low, bags lifted, choices made without weight because their destinations did not carry consequence. Clara remained still. The ticket in her hand had gone soft at the edges from the pressure of her grip. Not forgotten, not used, just waiting. You can still get on, Ethan said, his voice even, not urging, not pulling, just placing the option back where it belonged. Clara shook her head once, slow, almost to herself. If I leave now, she said, then everything they said becomes the only story that survives. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of coal and steam across the platform, wrapping around them both. Ethan glanced down the length of the train, then back at her. And if you go back, he asked. Clara's fingers moved again, finding the medallion, pressing it lightly against her chest like she needed to remember something she could not afford to forget. Then I finish what I started, she replied. Not loud, not dramatic, just certain in a way that did not need approval. Behind them, the men had stepped out onto the platform as well, keeping their distance now, no longer pushing forward, no longer certain of how this would end. The lead man watched Clara carefully, his posture no longer rigid, but not relaxed either. Waiting, measuring. The train conductor called out, his voice cutting through the air, announcing departure in minutes, not hours, not negotiable. Time was narrowing. Ethan reached out and took the ticket from Clara's hand before she could react, his movement calm, deliberate. She looked at him, not startled, but questioning. He folded the paper once, then slipped it back into his coat. Then this is not where you belong, he said. Clara's eyes searched his face, not for permission, not for reassurance, but for something else. Understanding. Red Hollow is 30 miles west, she said quietly. Rough terrain. The road is not clear this time of year. Ethan nodded once, already turning slightly as if the distance had already been measured in his mind. 30 miles is a long way for a sick town to wait, he replied. The words landed between them, simple, but carrying something heavier underneath. Clara exhaled slowly, and for the first time since he had seen her, the tension in her shoulders shifted. Not gone, but different. Focused. The kind of focus that came when the path forward stopped being a question. You do not have to do this, she said. Ethan looked out past the tracks, toward the dark stretch of land beyond the station, where the night swallowed everything that did not carry its own light. No, he said. I do not. He turned back to her then, his gaze steady, not soft, not hard, just present. But I am not the one running from it. The conductor called again, louder this time. Doors began to close, one by one, the opportunity to leave slipping away with each sound. The train gave a low, heavy pull, preparing to move. Clara did not look at it. Not anymore. She adjusted the strap of her bag over her shoulder, her movements precise now, intentional. The medallion rested against her chest, still, no longer clutched. Behind them, the men did not step forward. They did not stop her. Something had changed, something that made holding her back feel smaller than letting her go. Ethan stepped off the platform toward where his horse waited in the shadows beyond the station lights, tied where the dark began. He did not look back. He did not need to. A second later, he heard her footsteps behind him, steady despite the cold, despite the distance ahead. The train began to move, slow at first, then gathering pace, carrying away everyone who had chosen distance over consequence. And in its place, left behind on the platform, were two figures walking into the dark, not away from something, but toward it. The night did not welcome them. It simply made room as they stepped beyond the last reach of the station lights, where warmth and voices fell away and the land stretched cold and open in every direction. Ethan's horse shifted as he approached, breath visible in the air, muscles steady under the saddle like it had been waiting for a decision it already understood. He untied the reins without hurry, his movements practiced, efficient, shaped by years of doing what needed to be done without asking if it was easy. Clara stopped a few feet behind him, the cold catching up to her now that the moment at the station had passed. Without the walls, without the lanterns, the distance ahead felt real. 30 miles did not sound the same out here. It felt longer. You ride? Ethan asked, not turning yet. Clara gave a small nod, then realized he could not see it. Not well, she answered. Honest. No hesitation. Ethan glanced back at her, measuring quickly, not her strength, but her limits. You will have to, he said. No softness, but no doubt either. He adjusted the saddle slightly, then held the reins out toward her. You take the horse first. Clara frowned faintly, shaking her head. No. You know the terrain. You should lead. Ethan's gaze held hers for a moment, then shifted past her, toward the open land stretching west. "I will lead," he said, "just not from the saddle." The meaning settled between them before she could argue again. He was choosing the harder path without making it sound like one. Clara stepped forward slowly, her hand brushing the worn leather as she took the reins, her movements careful, not from fear of the animal, but from the weight of everything that now depended on reaching that town in time. Ethan walked ahead, boots pressing into frozen ground, his pace steady, not rushed, but not slow either. The kind of pace meant to last, not to impress. The station behind them grew smaller, its lights dimming until they were just a faint glow against the horizon, then nothing at all. The only sound left was the quiet rhythm of hooves and footsteps, and the wind moving across the open land like it had done long before either of them arrived. After a while, Clara spoke again, her voice softer, carried by the cold air between them. "Why Red Hollow?" she asked. Ethan did not stop walking. "You said they are still there," he replied. That was enough. Clara looked ahead, watching his back, the way he moved without hesitation, without looking for approval or acknowledgement. "Most men would not turn around," she said. Ethan let out a small breath that might have been a laugh if it had any sound to it. "Most men would not have stopped at the station," he answered. The wind picked up briefly, brushing past them, tugging at Clara's coat, slipping under the edges of her sleeves. She tightened her grip on the reins, then reached with her other hand to steady the medallion against her chest. A habit now, something she did without thinking. Ethan noticed it again, that small motion, that constant return to the same piece of silver. "That thing," he said after a moment, nodding slightly toward it without turning fully. "It keeps you warm?" Clara shook her head. "No," she said. "It keeps me honest." The answer lingered longer than the wind. Ethan did not ask more. Some things did not need explaining right away. The land began to change as they moved farther from the tracks, the ground uneven, patches of ice giving way to rough dirt and scattered brush. The path was not clear, but Ethan did not hesitate, choosing direction by memory, by instinct, by something built from years of knowing where not to step. Clara followed as best she could from the saddle, her balance improving slowly, not from skill, but from focus. Time stretched differently out here. Minutes felt longer. Distance felt heavier. And still, neither of them turned back. Somewhere ahead, beyond the dark ridges and the frozen ground, a town waited. Not for them, not knowingly, but waiting all the same. And with every step forward, the silence between them changed, not empty anymore, but filled with something neither of them needed to say out loud. They were not riding away from a story. They were riding into one that had already begun without them. The ground began to rise after the first few miles, not sharply, but enough to change the rhythm of every step, forcing them to adjust without breaking stride. Ethan did not slow, but his pace shifted, shorter steps, more deliberate, the kind of movement that conserved strength instead of spending it. Clara felt it from the saddle, the subtle change beneath her, the way the horse responded to the terrain before she even noticed it herself. The cold deepened as they climbed, settling into the low places between rocks, creeping up from the ground instead of falling from the sky. It made the air heavier, quieter, as if even sound had to work harder to move. "How far?" Clara asked after a while, her voice carrying just enough to reach him without breaking the stillness. Ethan did not turn. 15 miles, he said. Maybe a little less. Not comfort, not discouragement, just distance measured the way it was meant to be. Clara nodded to herself, adjusting her grip on the reins, her fingers stiff but steady. The medallion rested against her chest, no longer clutched, but not forgotten either. It moved slightly with each breath, a quiet reminder that she had not come this far to stop halfway. The wind shifted again, stronger this time, pushing across the ridge and catching the edge of Ethan's coat, pulling at it like it was testing his balance. He leaned into it without breaking pace, his boots finding ground that was not always visible, but always there. Clara watched him closely now, not just following, but learning, matching the rhythm, adjusting her posture in the saddle with each uneven stretch of land. "You have done this before," she said, more observation than question. Ethan let out a breath that disappeared into the cold. "Enough times," he replied. Clara studied the line of his shoulders, the way he moved without hesitation, without doubt, even when the path was not clear. "Most people avoid places like this in the dark," she added. Ethan glanced slightly to the side, not at her, but at the land stretching out ahead. Most people are not walking towards something that matters, he said. The words settled into her, not heavy, not light, just true in a way that did not need agreement. They moved on in silence after that, the kind that was not empty, but shared, shaped by the same direction, the same purpose. Time passed without measure, marked only by the steady movement forward and the gradual change in the land around them. The ridge gave way to a narrow stretch where the ground dipped slightly, sheltered from the worst of the wind. Ethan slowed just enough to let the horse step more easily, then stopped for the first time since they had left the station. Clara straightened slightly in the saddle, her body registering the pause before her mind caught up. "We rest here," Ethan said. "Not long. Just enough." Clara slid carefully from the horse, her legs unsteady at first, then finding balance as she adjusted. The ground beneath her felt different now, not because it had changed, but because she had. The distance behind them had already done something she could not name yet. Ethan moved to check the horse, his hands quick, efficient, making sure it had what it needed before anything else. Clara watched him for a moment, then reached into her bag, pulling out one of the small cloth-wrapped bundles. She unwrapped it slowly, revealing a small glass vial, the liquid inside catching what little light the night offered. She held it up for a second, studying it like it held more than just medicine. "There is enough for maybe 10 people," she said quietly. Ethan looked at the vial, then at her. "And how many are waiting?" he asked. Clara lowered her hand slightly. "More than that," she answered. The truth did not break her voice. It settled into it, steady, unavoidable. Ethan nodded once, not surprised, not discouraged, just accepting the weight of what lay ahead. He looked back toward the direction they had come from, where the station was no longer visible, no longer part of the world they were in. Then he turned forward again, toward the unseen town beyond the dark stretch of land. "Then we do not waste time," he said. Clara wrapped the vial again, placing it carefully back into her bag, her movements precise, controlled. She reached for the medallion once more, her fingers resting against it briefly, not searching this time, but confirming something that no longer needed doubt. When she looked up again, her eyes were steady, clearer than they had been at the station, clearer than they had been on the train platform. "Then we do not," she repeated. Ethan took a step forward, the pause already over before it had fully settled, and Clara followed, mounting the horse again with more certainty than before. The land stretched ahead, still dark, still cold, still uncertain. But the hesitation that had followed them from the station was gone. The land flattened again after the ridge, stretching wide and open like it had nothing left to hide, but that only made the distance feel longer, not shorter. The cold did not ease, it settled deeper, pressing into joints, slowing movement in ways that were easy to ignore at first and harder to deny with every mile. Ethan kept the same pace, steady, unbroken, his boots finding ground even when the dark blurred the edges of everything ahead. Clara rode behind him, her posture more stable now, her hands no longer fighting the reins but guiding them, small adjustments that showed she was learning faster than she realized. The silence between them shifted again, not empty, not heavy, but focused, shaped by the distance they had already covered and the weight of what still remained. After a while, a faint glow appeared on the horizon, not bright, not welcoming, just a dull scattering of light that barely held against the night. Clara saw it first. Her breath caught, not from surprise, but from recognition. "That is it," she said, her voice quieter than before, not from uncertainty, but from something closer to memory. Ethan slowed slightly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the distant outline. The town did not shine like a place full of life. The lights were uneven, scattered, some dimmer than others, like they were being kept alive out of habit rather than strength. "Does not look like a place waiting for help," he said. Clara did not answer right away. Her gaze stayed fixed on the faint glow, her fingers moving again, brushing against the medallion without gripping it this time. "It never does," she said finally. The wind carried a different scent now, faint but noticeable, something sharp beneath the cold, something that did not belong to open land. Ethan noticed it too, his pace adjusting again, slower now, more deliberate, as if the ground itself required more attention. "Something changed," he said, more to himself than to her. Clara nodded, though he could not see it. It always does when people wait too long, she replied. They moved closer, the glow growing slightly, enough to reveal shapes now, buildings low and spread out, shadows stretching between them like gaps no one had filled. No voices carried out to meet them. No movement greeted their approach. Just stillness. Not peaceful, just still. Ethan stopped a few yards short of the first structure, his hand lifting slightly to signal the horse before Clara even realized he had slowed. She brought the horse to a stop behind him, her eyes scanning the outlines of the town, searching for something familiar, something that told her she had not imagined what she left behind. This is not how it was, she said quietly. Not fear, not disbelief, just fact. Ethan stepped forward a few more paces, his boots softer now against the ground, his presence careful without being hesitant. What should it be, he asked. Clara slid down from the horse again, steadier this time, her legs holding her without hesitation. She moved a step closer to him, her eyes moving from building to building, tracing lines only she could see. There should be people outside, she said. Fires. Movement. Something that shows they are still trying. The wind moved through the empty spaces between the buildings, carrying nothing back. Ethan let out a slow breath, his gaze settling on the nearest doorway, slightly open, swaying just enough to show it had not been closed with care. Maybe they are, he said. Just not out here. Clara's hand moved to her bag, not hurried, not panicked, just ready. The medallion rested still against her chest, no longer needing to be held. She looked at Ethan once, her expression clear, focused, the hesitation from the station now completely gone. Then we do not wait, she said. Ethan gave a small nod, already stepping forward, not asking, not leading in front this time, but beside her. The distance between them had changed again. Not guide and follower, not stranger and stranger. Something quieter, something steadier. Together, they crossed into the town, the silence closing around them not like a warning, but like something waiting to be understood. The first step into the town did not echo the way footsteps usually do on wooden streets. It felt absorbed, like the place itself had no energy left to return even the smallest sound. Ethan slowed without stopping, his eyes moving across doorways, windows, the spaces in between where life should have been visible. Nothing rushed toward them. Nothing greeted them. But something was there. Something quiet. Clara felt it too. Not with her eyes. With memory. This street used to be full at night, she said, her voice low, not to fill the silence, but to measure it. People sat outside. Talked. Argued. Lived. Ethan nodded once, though the image she described did not match what stood before them now. A door creaked somewhere down the row, not opening, just shifting slightly in the wind, like it had not been closed with care in a long time. Clara moved forward first this time, her steps quicker, not rushed, but pulled by something she could not ignore. Ethan stayed beside her, not ahead, not behind. They passed the first building, then the next, each one holding the same stillness, the same absence of movement that felt less like emptiness and more like retreat. Then they heard it. Not loud, not clear, but there. A cough. Soft. Strained. Coming from inside one of the buildings ahead. Clara stopped instantly, her head turning toward the sound before Ethan even fully registered it. She did not speak. She did not hesitate. She moved. Ethan followed without a word. The door she reached was slightly open, just enough to show it had been used recently, but not closed properly. She pushed it gently, the wood giving with a quiet resistance before swinging inward. The air inside was different. Warmer, but not comfortable. Thick. Still. The kind of air that had been shared too long without being cleared. Shapes moved in the dim light. Not fast. Not strong. Just present. People. Sitting. Lying down. Waiting. Not for something specific. Just waiting. Clara stepped in slowly, her eyes adjusting, taking in the room not as a stranger, but as someone who understood what she was seeing before it was fully revealed. They stayed together, she said quietly. Not judgment. Not surprise. Just confirmation of what she had already feared. Ethan stood near the doorway, not stepping fully inside yet, his gaze moving from one figure to another, reading the room in a different way, not through knowledge, but through observation. These were not people who had given up. These were people who had run out of options. A man near the far wall shifted slightly, noticing them, his eyes tired but aware. He looked at Clara first, then at Ethan, and something flickered across his face, not recognition, not relief, but something harder to name. "You came back," he said, his voice rough, quiet-like. It had not been used much. Clara did not move closer right away. She stood where she was, letting the words settle. "I never left to stay gone," she replied. The man let out a slow breath, not quite a laugh, not quite anything else. "Some said you would not come back," he said. Clara's gaze softened just slightly, not toward him, but toward the room as a whole. "Some said a lot of things," she answered. Ethan stepped inside then, closing the door behind him without making it sound like a barrier. Just a simple action that shifted the space from open to contained. The wind disappeared. The silence remained, but it changed. Clara moved forward at last, setting her bag down carefully on a nearby table, her hands already moving, unwrapping cloth, preparing what little she had brought. The medallion rested against her chest, untouched now, no longer something she needed to hold. She looked at Ethan once, not asking, not explaining, just acknowledging that he had come this far with her. He gave a small nod, stepping aside, giving her space not because he was unsure, but because he understood his role had changed. Outside, the town remained quiet. Inside, something had begun to move again. Not fast, not loud, but enough. The room did not change all at once. It shifted in small ways, the kind that could be missed if someone was not paying attention. But Ethan noticed them because he was not trying to understand the medicine. He was watching the people. Clara moved through them with a quiet precision, not rushing, not hesitating, her hands steady as she opened each cloth bundle, each vial placed exactly where it needed to be. She did not speak much. She did not explain what she was doing. She simply began, and somehow that was enough for the room to follow her rhythm. A woman near the corner adjusted her position, making space without being asked. A man who had been leaning against the wall straightened slightly, his eyes tracking Clara's movements with something that had not been there before. Not hope, not yet, but something close enough to matter. Ethan stepped farther inside, his back no longer near the door, his presence settling into the room in a different way. He was not part of the work, but he was part of the space, and that seemed to hold things together in a way that could not be explained. Clara knelt beside the first patient, her fingers moving with quiet familiarity, checking, measuring, deciding. She did not waste motion. She did not repeat anything she did not need to. Each action carried purpose, and that purpose spread through the room like a slow, steady current. The man who had spoken earlier watched her closely, his expression shifting as she worked, something in his posture loosening, as if a tension he had been holding without realizing it was finally beginning to ease. "You always worked like that?" he said after a while, his voice softer now, less guarded. Clara did not look up. "Because there is no other way that matters," she replied. The answer was simple, but it carried weight that reached beyond the room. Ethan moved to the side, picking up a small chair that had been pushed against the wall and setting it closer to where Clara was working, not speaking, not asking, just placing it where it could be used. Clara glanced at it briefly, then at him, a small acknowledgement passing between them before she returned to her work. The medallion rested against her chest, untouched now, no longer something she reached for, because whatever it had anchored before had already settled into something stronger. Time moved differently inside the room. The cold outside no longer reached them, but the weight of the situation remained, pressing quietly against every movement, every decision. Clara reached into her bag again, her fingers slowing for just a fraction of a second before pulling out another vial. She studied it briefly, not with doubt, but with calculation. Ethan saw that hesitation, brief as it was, and understood what it meant without needing it explained. Limited. Everything she had was limited. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so it did not carry beyond her. "How many?" he asked. Clara did not look at him, her focus still on the vial in her hand. "Less than we need," she said. Not fear, not panic, just truth. Ethan nodded once, his gaze moving across the room again, counting not numbers, but faces, positions, possibilities. "Then we make it count," he replied. Clara set the vial down carefully, her hands moving again, steady as before, but something in her posture had changed. Not heavier, sharper, more defined. She was not just treating anymore. She was choosing. The man by the wall shifted again, watching them both now, his expression no longer guarded, but something closer to uncertain understanding. "We told you to leave," he said quietly, the words carrying a different tone than before. Clara paused just long enough to hear it, then continued her work without looking up. "Yes," she said. "You did." The man lowered his gaze slightly, not out of shame, but out of something more complex, something that had not yet found a name. The room remained quiet, but it was no longer the same silence that had greeted them when they arrived. This silence held movement, intention, something beginning to rebuild itself piece by piece. Outside, the wind still moved through the empty streets, unchanged. But inside, under low light and quiet hands, something had shifted in a way that could not be undone. The rhythm inside the room began to settle into something steady, not calm, not safe, but structured in a way that gave every movement meaning. Clara worked without pause, her hands moving from one person to the next, adjusting, measuring, choosing with a precision that left no space for hesitation. The vials in her bag were fewer now, each one carrying more weight than the last. She knew it. Ethan knew it. No one else needed to be told. The man by the wall watched her closely, his expression no longer guarded, but searching, as if trying to understand something he had dismissed too quickly before. "You said it would spread," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Clara did not stop working. "I said it would not stop if nothing changed," she replied. The difference between those two truths hung in the air, quiet but undeniable. Ethan moved again, not toward her this time, but toward the far side of the room where a window sat half covered with cloth. He pulled it back slightly, letting in a thin line of cold air, enough to shift the heaviness inside without, breaking the fragile balance Clara had created. The people nearest the window stirred slightly, not disturbed, but responding, like something inside them recognized the change. Clara noticed it without looking up. "Keep it open," she said. Ethan gave a small nod, securing the cloth so it would not fall back into place. Small changes. That was how this would work. Not all at once. Not fast, but enough to matter. Clara reached for another vial, then stopped. Her hand hovered for a fraction of a second before lowering. She looked at the people in the room, not as a group, but as individuals, each one holding a different place in the balance she was trying to restore. Ethan saw the shift again, sharper this time. Not doubt. Decision. She stood slowly, her posture straightening as she turned toward the man by the wall. "You," she said, her voice steady, not commanding, but clear. The man blinked, surprised not by being addressed, but by the way she did it, as if she expected him to respond. "There are others in town?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "Some stayed in their homes. Some did not want to come here." Clara held his gaze. "Then they will not come unless something changes," she said. The man shifted, uncertain. "What do you need?" he asked. Clara glanced at Ethan briefly, then back at the man. "Movement," she said. "Air. Distance between them. And someone they trust enough to listen." The words settled differently this time. Not like advice. Like instruction shaped by necessity. The man looked around the room, then back at her, something in his posture straightening, not fully, but enough to show that the weight he carried had found direction. "They will not listen to me," he said. Clara shook her head slightly. "They will not listen to anyone who stands still," she replied. The meaning was clear without explanation. Ethan stepped forward again, his presence quiet but firm. "Then you do not stand still," he said. The man looked at him, then at Clara, and for the first time since they arrived, something changed in his expression that was not uncertainty, not resistance, but resolve. He nodded once. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Clara turned back to her bag, her movements resuming, but different now, sharper, more focused on what could be done instead of what could not. The medallion rested against her chest, still untouched, no longer needed to guide her. Outside, the wind moved through the empty streets, but now it carried something else with it. A door opening somewhere down the road. Then another. Small sounds. Faint, but real. Inside, Ethan watched as the room shifted again, not because the medicine had changed, but because the people had. And that was something no vial could hold. The night did not end with a single moment. It shifted slowly, almost unnoticed, the way dawn does when no one is looking directly at it. Inside the room, the air felt different now, not lighter, not safe, but moving, changing, no longer trapped in the stillness it had carried when they first arrived. Clara continued her work, but the urgency had transformed into rhythm, into something that could last longer than a single effort. The vials were nearly gone, but the room was no longer relying on them alone. People had begun to move. Not all at once, not in unison, but enough. The man who had stood by the wall earlier was no longer there. Through the open doorway, Ethan could see faint movement in the street beyond, figures stepping out, doors opening wider, the town beginning to breathe again in small, uneven ways. Clara noticed it too, though she did not stop what she was doing. She simply nodded once to herself, as if something she had hoped for had finally answered. Ethan stepped closer to the doorway, his presence still quiet, still steady, watching the change not with surprise, but with recognition. This was not a miracle. It was something slower, something earned. Behind him, Clara finished tending to the last person in the room, her hands slowing for the first time since they had arrived. She sat back slightly, her breath steady, not exhausted, but aware of the distance she had crossed to get here. The medallion rested against her chest, untouched for a long time now. She reached for it once more, her fingers brushing over its worn surface, not to hold on, but to acknowledge what it had brought her back. 2. Ethan turned slightly, watching her from where he stood. "Is it enough?" he asked. Clara looked around the room, then toward the open door, where the faint sounds of the town beginning to move reached them in soft, scattered pieces. "It is not everything," she said, "but it is enough to begin again." The words did not carry relief. They carried truth. Ethan nodded once, accepting it the same way he had accepted everything else along the way. No more, no less. Outside, the first hint of morning touched the edges of the sky, not bright, not warm yet, but present. The darkness did not disappear. It simply made room. Clara stood slowly, adjusting the strap of her bag, now lighter than when she had carried it into town. She walked toward the doorway, stopping beside Ethan, her gaze moving across the street, taking in the small changes, the quiet signs of life returning where silence had been. "They will remember this differently," she said after a moment. Ethan glanced at her, then back at the town. "People usually do," he replied. Clara let out a soft breath, not frustration, not regret, just understanding. "They will say they endured," she continued, "that they held together." Ethan's eyes remained on the street, where a man helped another step outside, slow but steady. "Maybe they did," he said. Clara was quiet for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Maybe they did," she repeated. The silence between them settled again, but it was no longer the same silence from before. It carried something else now. Respect. Recognition. Something that did not need to be spoken to be understood. After a while, Clara turned slightly, looking at Ethan, her expression calm, steady, but different from the woman he had found at the station. Not stronger, not softer, just clearer. "You can go now," she said. No demand, no expectation, just an option, placed where it belonged. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then back at the town, then out toward the land they had crossed to get here. He did not answer right away. He did not need to. Instead, he stepped past her, out into the street, his boots meeting the ground with the same steady weight they had carried since the beginning. Clara watched him go, not stopping him, not calling him back. She simply stood there, the medallion resting quietly against her chest, the town moving slowly around her. And for the first time since the night had begun, there was nothing left that needed to be proven. Only something that had been chosen. And that was enough.